America had no national banks until 1863. You were taught the country needed centralized banking to grow. Yet for the first 70-plus years of the Republic, the economy exploded without a permanent federal system. Railroads pushed west. Cities rose. Trade boomed. So what actually powered daily finance? Something older, more local, more human. A patchwork of trust, notes, and community decisions. That system worked until someone decided uniformity mattered more than flexibility. And we are still living inside the edit. You were told America had no real banks until 1863. The claim lands like a contradiction. The country grew anyway, from shaky colonies to a continental power in under a century. How did daily commerce happen without centralized institutions? The answer sits in plain sight, yet rarely taught. Colonial America ran on personal credit networks, foreign coins, and bills of credit issued by individual colonies. Spanish dollars circulated as the unofficial standard. Wampum, tobacco, and nails served where metal ran short. England restricted colonial coinage. Settlers improvised. Trust formed the backbone. Merchants in Boston or Philadelphia extended credit to farmers and artisans based on reputation and relationships. You knew your supplier. He knew you. Debts carried over seasons without formal paperwork in many cases. Land banks appeared in some colonies. These were not national. They stayed local, tied to specific needs. The first Bank of the United States arrived in 1791 under Alexander Hamilton. It faced fierce opposition. Its charter expired in 1811. The second bank followed in 1816. Andrew Jackson vetoed renewal in 1832. Centralized power met resistance again and again. By the 1830s, most banking fell to the states. Some required special legislative charters. This opened doors to favoritism. Others experimented with broader access. The economy did not collapse. Trade expanded. People adapted. Notes from sound local banks passed at near face value within communities. Distant or dubious notes traded at discounts. This created natural market discipline. You carried a mix of coins and paper in your pocket. Redemption happened at the counter of the issuing bank, or through brokers who specialized in sorting good paper from bad. The system felt messy to outsiders, yet it financed canals, early factories, and westward movement. Then states began passing free banking laws. Michigan led in 1837. New York followed in 1838. The idea spread. Almost anyone meeting basic capital rules could open a bank. No special legislative vote needed in many places. Banks issued their own notes backed by bonds or other securities deposited with state authorities. Thousands of note varieties entered circulation. Over 8,000 different kinds by some counts. This was the system that powered America until 1863. Decentralized, adaptive, tied to real collateral and community oversight. No single authority dictated terms nationwide. You lived inside its rhythm. The free banking era proved something fundamental. Economies could run on local trust without federal uniformity. Railroads crossed states. Cities filled with immigrants. Commerce flowed. The math felt cleaner when decisions stayed close to the ground. Institutions later claimed chaos. But the growth told a different story. Something more human operated before the rewrite arrived. Free banking spread because it solved real problems. After the Second Bank of the United States closed, states filled the gap. Almost anyone with sufficient capital and acceptable securities could start issuing notes. Banks operated from a single office in many cases. No branches allowed under most rules. This kept institutions rooted in their communities. Notes had to be redeemed in specie on demand at the counter, gold or silver coin. If a bank could not pay, it faced closure. Market forces policed overissuance better than distant regulators in some regions. Critics later pointed to wildcat banks. Some operators set up in remote areas. Redemption became difficult. Fraud occurred. Notes from shaky institutions circulated at heavy discounts. Yet many banks remained sound. Regional differences mattered. Eastern financial centers developed sophisticated broker networks. They rated paper daily. You checked the discount list before accepting distant notes. The chaos was real in places, but the overall economy kept expanding. Farmers borrowed against crops. Merchants financed inventory. Small manufacturers grew. The patchwork funded infrastructure that connected a vast nation. Then came the Civil War. The Union needed money fast. Secretary of the Treasury Salmon P. Chase pushed for a national system. Uniform currency would help finance the effort. It would also create a reliable market for government bonds. Congress passed the National Currency Act on February 25, 1863. The Senate vote was razor-thin, 23 to 21. President Lincoln signed it. The law created nationally chartered banks. These new institutions could issue uniform national bank notes backed by U.S. securities deposited with the Treasury. The office of the Comptroller of the currency formed to supervise them. A key provision restricted each national bank to a single office. No branching across state lines. Notes carried the same design nationwide. This reduced confusion. To discourage the old system, Congress later imposed a tax on state bank notes. The pressure worked. State-issued paper gradually faded. You woke up one day to a different financial calendar. Dates shifted. The old patchwork of thousands of notes disappeared from daily use. Contracts and wages aligned to the new national notes. Workers and businesses adjusted. Some welcomed stability. Others noticed the power moving away from communities. The edit happened under crisis. Few paused to debate alternatives. The free banking era, with its thousands of local experiments, ended not by popular vote, but by wartime necessity and institutional design. What had felt normal for decades suddenly became the old, messy way. Institutions now controlled the measure of money itself. The principle echoed older calendar priesthoods. Whoever sets the standard shapes what counts as normal. The National Banking Act replaced a living, breathing system with something more uniform and controllable. Pre-1863 America financed growth through local trust and adaptable notes. Merchants knew their customers. Communities judged reliability firsthand. Discounts reflected real risk. The free banking era was imperfect, yes. Failures happened. Wildcat operators exploited gaps. Yet the economy did not grind to a halt. Railroads spanned the continent. Factories multiplied. Cities absorbed waves of settlers. Local decisions proved flexible enough for a young, expanding nation. The fair counterargument holds weight. A patchwork of thousands of note types created friction. Redemption varied by distance. Fraud wasted time. Uniform national currency reduced counterfeiting and confusion. It stabilized government finance during existential war. The Gregorian calendar also works better for solar tracking than older lunar systems. Practicality won for agriculture and administration. Yet the deeper question remains. Who decided that federal uniformity should override local alignment? Who sacrificed the oldest relationship between people and their money, trust built face-to-face, for a structure that primarily serves institutions? On paper, the change arrived cleanly. In practice, state banks faced new taxes and competitive pressure. Notes that once circulated freely lost ground. Workers received pay in national currency. Landlords demanded it. The old variety faded like erased days in 1582. People adjusted because they had to. Few celebrated the loss of community control. The dual banking system that persists today traces directly to that 1863 compromise. State banks survived, but operate alongside national ones under different rules. The tension between local and central never fully resolved. Ethiopia still runs its own calendar with 13 months of sunshine. Over 100 million people measure time differently and thrive. Their system was never overwritten by colonial decree. In finance, scattered experiments elsewhere showed decentralized models could endure. The Ashango bone reminds us humans once tracked cycles close to biology and sky. Your wallet once held paper tied to nearby institutions. The body still senses when money feels distant or imposed. The astronomy of trust has not changed. Only the calendar did. Kodak once ran internal accounts on a 13-month system for decades because equal periods made comparisons honest. Local banking offered something similar. Notes sized to actual community needs. Institutions killed the proposal then. They phased out free banking later. The mechanisms evolved. The principle stayed constant. Whoever controls the measure controls what feels inevitable. We carry mental rhymes to remember uneven months. We accept uneven financial rules without question. A system designed for humans would not require such constant translation. The old bone in Brussels still lines up with lunar phases after 20,000 years. Local trust once lined up with economic reality. The only question is why we stopped listening when the sky, and our own communities counted differently.